Delegates and friends, I'd first of all like to thank all of the proposers and seconders of the motions here this morning and those who spoke to the motions as well. And I think it's very evident from the passion of that debate how central and core are health issues to the Labour Party and how absolutely disgraceful is the way in which the parties in government at present have led the health services into a situation where we now face more than £1 billion of cuts in 1 year on a system that hasn't been reformed, and we see the most vulnerable being attacked. And I have to say I am very frightened for the health service in the forthcoming years in this context. Nowhere has this government more mishandled the unprecedented opportunities than they have in relation to health, and nowhere have they blown the opportunity in a way that's going to be felt more painfully. Between 1998 and 2007, spending on health services went up from 3.5 billion to 15 billion. Colleagues, how we could have used that money to build a fair, equitable and efficient health service. When the Labour Party's proposals for universal health insurance were launched in 2001, our estimation was that it would bring the cost of running the health services up to £7 billion. And that would have been for a super service where the service to public patients would have been brought up to the level of the service that private patients and the waiting times that private patients were having at that time. The spend is now double that amount, but the service is even more inefficient and the treatment of the public and private patient are even more unequal. It is well beyond time for the government to realise what now all of the opposition parties, led by the Labour Party, have come to realise, that we must have a one-tier system that treats patients on the basis of need and that incentivises the best of limited resources if we're to fix our health services. Mary Harney's so-called reform programme has been a sham, and a very expensive sham. All of the layers of management in the HSE are still in place, and on top of them we now have management consultants and spin doctors whose exorbitant wages are in stark contrast to the frontline workers who are being asked to pay the price. And they tell us this week that we need these gurus more than we need a cervical vaccine that will save lives, as Marie Maloney said in her presentation this morning, for a cost of just about €8 million. And disgracefully, as Mary Upton has said, they have turned back on their promise to cystic fibrosis patients that they would have a unit built that would save their lives. And it is an absolute disgrace that they can prioritise these management gurus and consultants and spin doctors, and that those people need the money more than people with cystic fibrosis, more than saving the lives of young people, and more than all of the frontline workers and all of the people who were spoken about here in this debate this morning, whether they be the elderly, whether they be people waiting years for diagnosis, the variety of people in the health services who are suffering in pain because of the mismanagement of the services by this government, and it is an absolute disgrace. A culture of greed has been transplanted into our health services in accordance with PD ideology and with spineless Fianna Fáil and Green Party collusion. And even with the demise of the PDs, they haven't the courage to eradicate it. The intention to plough ahead with co-located private hospitals and public sites, the growing privatisation of home care packages and care of the elderly, the salaries agreed in the new consultants' contract, sending cervical cancer screening halfway around the world because they won't pay for it here in Ireland. These are all evidence that the government has no intention of abandoning the path they are on, despite the failure to reach any of their own targets on extra beds, care in the community and an end to the chaos in A&E departments, which Minister Harney said a couple of years ago was a national crisis and which is now just as bad. And again, as I said already, it is absolutely disgraceful that they cannot provide the funding for the cystic fibrosis patients, that they can't even fulfil that promise. And they're sending physiotherapists and other specialists working in far corners of the world because we cannot afford to employ frontline services. Instead, the same old system will be pared back with over £1 billion to be taken out of the planned spend for 2009. The size of the hole in the budget is so big that patient services will be severely cut and waiting times will grow. The predicted rise in unemployment will result in more people qualifying for a medical card and less money coming in from the health levy. It is estimated that this will cost the health budget €200 million. And health insurance income to hospitals will undoubtedly drop significantly as well, as more people cannot afford health insurance. The Labour Party has consistently highlighted the madness of focusing on fiscal control in isolation, while the loss of jobs is blighting people's lives, as well as costing the Exchequer a substantial amount in tax foregone, social welfare payments and spending power. It is going to cost the health budget several hundred millions as well, not to mention the adverse health effects associated with unemployment and worry about paying bills. Side by side with this huge cutback in spending, they have the sheer effrontery to tell us that they're ploughing ahead with the so-called reconfiguration of hospitals around the country, as referred to by my colleague Senator Alan Kelly. Cutting back services in places like Neenah and Ennis and Mallow and Bantry and Sligo and Monaghan and Louth, in the south east and here in the Midlands I know there are problems as well. But they tell us we needn't worry because we're all going to end up with better services if we only have faith. Who are they trying to fool? Smaller hospitals have a vital role to play that is both economically good value and a great service for local communities. They are willing to engage in change, but they cannot be used as a smokescreen for saving money. Nor can the vulnerable elderly be used as a smokescreen for saving money. And I would fully support the motions in relation to that and the amendment. And I know that there are elderly people in places like Carlow and Waterford and many other parts of the country who are literally being put out of their homes. And I spoke to some people in Carlow recently, where the people who have lived all their lives, or all of their recent years in their lives, are now being told that they have to move out of what they call their home, simply to save the HSE money. That is not acceptable. I want to refer to the motions here this morning, and I want to accept the motions that have been put forward. I just would ask for, in relation to motion number 32, about organ and tissue donation. It was formally moved, but there are some sensitivities around that issue, and I think we need to examine those sensitivities before moving to that position. But in regard to all of the other motions, I would fully accept them as spokesperson. And in relation to the breast screening, the motion in relation to reducing the age, and indeed I know that there are people also campaigning to have breast screening extended to older women. I just have to make the point, and I fully agree with those motions, but I have to make the point that there are many of us still in the country who haven't got breast screening. And if the breast screening had been rolled out according to the time frame that was proposed, we would all now be within the system. But there are still people in parts of the West and South who haven't got breast screening. I also want to refer to the motion in relation...
John, if you could conclude, please.
Yeah, in relation to Sligo. We fully support the people of Sligo. It is crazy that there is no centre north of a line between Galway and Dublin. Money has been robbed in the health service from the mentally ill, from the terminally ill, from traveller education, from people with disabilities, and they've robbed medical cards from people over 70. The longer the current government stays in office, the longer the Irish people have to tolerate a failed model of organising health services, whose failure is becoming more and more evident as the cutbacks bite. Only a new government, and a government led by Labour, will change that. Thank you, delegates.